So we're back with another photography guide. I asked you over on my Instagram page what you wanted to see, and you wanted to know about camera settings. So we'll start at the beginning and go over how to set up a DSLR and use the manual settings. So I found when I first started, the most difficult thing was trying to get like a correct exposure, because I didn't really understand what all the numbers meant. So there's basically three things that you need to know. There's the ISO, there's the aperture, and the shutter speed. They all control the light in one way or another. So if you think of it in the simplest terms of light and dark, with the ISO, making a number bigger makes it lighter, making it smaller makes it darker. With the shutter speed, making it faster makes it darker, making it slower makes it lighter. And then with the aperture, making the aperture wider makes it brighter, and making it smaller makes it darker. The aperture is a bit of a weird one to get your head around though, because the smaller the number is, the wider the aperture is. So f2.8 lets in more light than f8, but they also control different things. So what the ISO is it controls how sensitive the sensor is to light. And that's important because you want to try and keep that as low as possible. The higher that is, the grainier the image is going to be in the end. And then with the aperture, that controls how much is going to be in focus. So with landscapes, generally you want everything to be in focus. So I'd aim to be at f8 or f11, somewhere in that range there. If you want like a shallow depth of field, so say my face is in focus, then the background is blurry, you want to be as wide as possible, which is like f2.8 or wider. Then the smaller it is, the more it is going to be in focus. But the downside to that is it cuts out light the smaller that the aperture is. So that's why you often see me using a tripod, because it just gives you more options. And then the last thing is the shutter speed, and this gives you a bit more creative control, I guess, because if you've seen waterfall photos where all the water's smoothed out, that's done with a long exposure. Or if you see waves crashing and it's like frozen, the waves going around the lighthouse or something like that, that's done with a fast shutter speed. So that's the basics. We'll use this camera. This is the 600D. It's the first DSLR that I got. We'll set up on the tripod and we'll show you the differences looking out this way. So I've got the camera set up now, and like I was saying before, I'd recommend using a tripod just so you've got like a steady base, and it gives you a lot more options and you've got a lot more time to think about it. Because I found when I first started, I'd have like no consistency in my shots. Sometimes they'd be like really overexposed, sometimes they'd be really under, and sometimes they're right. And I never really understood why. But when you're on a tripod, you can, like we're saying with the aperture, if you know you want to get everything in focus, dial in f8, and then you've got two things to think about rather than three, which doesn't sound like a lot, but making things simple makes a big difference to me anyway. The reason I like to do it this way is you've got like a steady base, and say you wanted to get everything in focus, we could dial in the f8 like we talked about before. So that's done. We don't have to think about that anymore. And like we were saying with the ISO, we want that to be as low as possible. So if we drop that down to 100, then that's done. Then all we need to think about now is the shutter speed. And when you're looking through the viewfinder, you've probably noticed that there's a little dial thing at the bottom down here, and you want to try and get it in the center, because on the Canon it's got -3, -2, -1, 0, +1, +2, +3, and that's measured in stops of light. So when it's in the middle, the camera's saying that's properly exposed. It's not always going to be accurate, but it's a good ballpark figure of where to aim for. So now we've got the ISO and the aperture dialed in, we just need to match the shutter speed to get the proper exposure. So that's basically all you have to do to get a correct exposure. You can see it on the live view as well. You can see it in real time how the picture's going to look, and as you can see, that is properly exposed. This is generally the way that I set it up. So if I'm on a tripod, I would put the ISO as low as possible, pick the aperture that I want, and then set the shutter speed. If I'm doing it handheld though, I tend to set the shutter speed first. So I tend to go about 1/200th of a second because I can handhold that well and not get any camera shake, and it freezes most subjects. After that, I pick the aperture. Don't want it to be all in focus or single out one thing. And then after that, I choose the ISO. It's a bit of a game of compromises, but you have to work out what's important to you and then go from there. But I definitely recommend using a tripod and then going from there. But I think I'm going to do another video on this with this camera setup where we go out and get some pictures with it, and then we can do some problem solving as things pop up. It's not always as straightforward as that just was. Everything in front of me is quite evenly lit because the sun's behind me. Put any questions that you got down below in the comments and we'll try and cover them in a different video. But I hope you found that helpful. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you did. And if you want to help support the channel, I've got a range of prints and greetings cards starting from £2.50 with free UK postage over on adamkappa.co.uk. That massively helps out the channel, and I can make more videos the better they go. So put your questions down below and I'll see you next time.